At the same time, while they're releasing all this important diary information, all of which, again, should have been given to Judicial Watch years ago, they're hiding the HHS's specific information about what Fauci was getting in terms of remuneration from the taxpayer. It was treated as compensation by the government, and they don't want to tell us the details. And many other NIH employees. So Rand Paul released the diaries as a prelude to Fauci coming in to testify, not voluntarily by subpoena. He refused an invitation to testify voluntarily to the committee that Paul is chairman of, the Homeland Security and Governmental Affairs Committee. And Fauci took the fifth. I mean, that's the whole heart of it. And here's what Senator Paul at least had to say in part as he introduced Dr. Fauci and the concerns he had about what he was up to.
Ordering it. President Biden issued you a sweeping pardon extending back to 2014, the same pardon he gave to his son Hunter. A pardon may protect a person from criminal prosecution. It doesn't rewrite history. It does not erase documents. It does not convert a misleading statement into a truthful one. And it does not prevent Congress from establishing what happened. There will be another pandemic. There will be another crisis. And there will again be officials who insist that uncertainty must be hidden for the public's own good. They will demand obedience. They will invoke science. I am the science, as though it were a commandment. They will argue that government officials cannot be questioned because questioning them would undermine public trust. They have it backwards. It is secrecy that destroys trust. It is arrogance that destroys trust. It is censorship that destroys trust. And it is the refusal to admit error that destroys trust. That loss of trust may be your most damaging legacy. Trust can't be ordered. It has to be earned. No scientist is above scrutiny. No government official is beyond accountability. And no public servant has the right to treat the suffering of millions of Americans as a footnote to his preferred version of history.
So, as you can see from Dr. Paul's remarks, and the hearing is widely available, we'll provide a link to below. You know, Fauci took the Fifth Amendment, and that means none of the questions raised either by the diaries or information obtained by Judicial Watch, other information that's been released, such as the admission by one of his top lieutenants that they were trying to hide records from people under FOIA. None of those questions have been answered. Now, I know there's a big debate as to whether or not he can be prosecuted given the pardon issued to him by Joe Biden. I'm of the belief that that pardon is null and void for a variety of reasons. One of which is the kind of the auto pen issue, which is that there's significant evidence that Joe Biden didn't actually grant the pardons. The pardons just happened and were authorized not by the president, by others on his staff, and so there's no legal effect there. The second issue is the pardon itself, which broadly gives him a pardon for anything he may have done in terms of federal crimes going back to 2014. It doesn't list the crimes, and in basic, if you understand the history of the pardon power and the way it's been treated, unless there's a specific issue that you're being pardoned for, it's null and void. There is no pardon. A pardon for everything is a pardon for no thing. How is it enforceable? How is it enforceable? And thirdly, about the prosecution in these circumstances, I would recommend, if the prosecution's to be pursued, it still be pursued. Because, as Rand Paul intimated, there's at least a perjury issue about whether Fauci lied to Senator Paul and to Congress generally when he said that they did not fund gain-of-function research. In fact, they did fund it, time and time again. And so if the pardons aren't valid, then, and if there's a crime that they thought there's sufficient reason to charge for perjury or obstruction or contempt of Congress, whatever, pursue it. And let Fauci raise the argument that I'm immune based on this pardon and litigate the issue. Furthermore, if you look at the history of pardons, you'll see that there's an issue about what does the pardon actually prevent? It doesn't prevent an investigation. It doesn't prevent Fauci from being called as a witness. Arguably, it doesn't prevent him from being prosecuted for federal crimes. If the pardon is valid, arguably you can be investigated, tried, found guilty, meaning convicted, but the pardon protects you from suffering any punishment. So those are the areas I would be pushing on, and the administration hasn't been pushing on it, frankly. I don't know why. Now, Rand Paul's going to be talking about finding him in contempt. You know, I think my impression is his taking the Fifth Amendment, you know, that's going to be a tough issue to overcome. I'm not a lawyer, but, you know, having been involved in many issues related to assertions of the Fifth Amendment here at Judicial Watch, it's once a person who asserts the Fifth Amendment, it's just kind of a tough nut to crack to get them to require them to testify after they assert the Fifth. I mean, as you might imagine, the courts are deferential to a person protecting or asserting their constitutional right not to be required to testify against themselves if they have reasonable concern about a criminal investigation. So, you know, the long and short of it is it's going to be tough, but there still needs to be a criminal investigation done of the crimes related to Fauci's conduct and around COVID generally. There's the censorship, there's the gain of function fraud, there's a vaccine gamesmanship that went on here. There may be fraud there. I don't know. I mean, you don't know unless you look. I mean, there's evidence of fraud with respect at least to gain of function. They knew that they knew what they were doing, the government did, and time and time again they caught them engaged in gain of function, yet continued to fund them anyway. And then tried to cover up the fact that it was taking place. Now, the senators, if you watched the hearing, did a good job of raising a variety of issues that Fauci, of course, wasn't going to testify about, but worth highlighting. Now, you know, Judicial Watch uncovered, as I said, much of what we know about the COVID scandals. One good way to get a summary of the information, if you forgive me, is to purchase my Judicial Watch book, Rights and Freedoms in Peril. Chapter 4 tells you pretty much everything you need to know about Fauci and company, the vaccines, and the cover-ups. But I went through and picked out a few tweets that kind of tell you what's going on with Fauci. We had, for instance, Judicial Watch had uncovered how the Fauci agency knew China was hiding COVID data in early 2020. Hey everyone, Judicial Watch President Tom Fitton here with the latest on Fauci's agency and the China COVID cover-up. We have new documents out of Fauci's agency that show top officials there knew China was withholding key information in the early days of COVID that could have helped America better prepare for the pandemic. Now, these documents have been hidden from us for 2 years, and it took a federal lawsuit to get these records finally out of Fauci's agency. I don't know about you, but I'm tired of the cover. As I tweeted, it's now confirmed that Fauci was hiding material about China and the Chinese communists are hiding material about China. Because his asserting the Fifth is not disclosure, it's not transparency. It's a different issue about what he has a right to do versus the testimony that would help us understand the threat from China. Another big issue that was raised with Dr. Fauci was the fact that his agency, NIH, et cetera, was funding horrific, grotesque experiments involving the cutting up mutilation, and then splicing with mice the bodies of unborn babies killed through abortion. And Judicial Watch has taken the lead in exposing this over the years. And what we found was some of the most disturbing information I've ever seen in all my years here at Judicial Watch. I explain it here in this video. These are the documents, 676 pages, and they're hard to describe. When you see an invoice, let me pull one out here. Thymus, second trimester. Liver, second trimester. The fee for each is blacked out, $750, paid via Visa. Document after document showing that livers and organs of unborn human beings in the second trimester are being sold to this lab. Now, they would say not at a profit, I would presume. That deserves further investigation, and frankly, it ought to be under criminal investigation. But really disturbing material. And I tell you, we've got all the documents here. You can go through and see document after document. It is a catalog of horrors that I've never seen before here at Judicial Watch. I tell you, I've never seen anything like this before in my life. I hope never to see it again, and I hope it's stopped. I'm not confident it's been. Every responsible official of government, from the President through the HHS Secretary, Henry Azar, should investigate and stop the trafficking of the organs of unborn human beings. I think you would agree with that. As far as I'm concerned, these are taxpayer-funded, Frankenstein-type experiments. And as a taxpayer, I want no part of it. I understand they're trying to come up with a solution to a disease, but the means does not justify the ends. And one of the most significant issues, and I think another reason why Fauci took the fifth, is the fact that Judicial Watch exposed how his agencies, long before the COVID erupted, knew that they were funding mutant viruses in China. Now, as I've observed, we've been talking about gain of function, and now I think many of us know what it means. It's taking a virus and increasing its virality, making it more likely to be infectious and dangerous. Literally, what they called it, and I wish I had known they were calling it that because it's so obvious, they were calling it making mutant viruses. As I say, smoking guns, Fauci did it. We found the documents on his agency funding creation of coronavirus mutants in Wuhan, gain of function 101. Here are the receipts, and here's a video of me talking about it. But you can see I've given you proof positive information as confirmed by NIH, NIAID, etc., that they were funding mutant viruses, the creation of mutant viruses, the very definition of gain of function research. And what was the result? I think it was COVID-19. Now, do I know that for a fact? Of course I don't. But it stands to reason, don't you agree? So do you agree it stands to reason? So when you look at the documents, the defense says, well, the virus that the COVID virus wasn't related to the gain of function or the viruses Wuhan was working on. It was a different virus. Well, that's a disputable claim. But secondly, irrelevant. It's the technique. It's the technique. They were being trained and given money related to the technique of gain of function. So if you know how to do X for the virus you're getting paid to work on, you can do Y on the virus you're separately working on, coronavirus, or at least that was the concern. So, what's frustrating to me is that none of this is news in the sense that we have more than enough information Judicial Watch has compiled, more than enough information to warrant Justice Department criminal investigations of these various scandals. And I'm not saying Fauci directly or specifically, Maybe in certain circumstances. It's like, where's the investigation of how this all occurred? One thing that I noted that other people really hadn't picked up on was what Fauci said about school closures. Now, Scott Atlas is a physician who was hired, expert guy, just a great guy by all accounts. I don't know him personally, but I value his opinion and analysis, because he was a skeptic of the way we were responding to COVID. So he came into the White House and Fauci went crazy. He hated his guts and was trying to get him fired, wanted him out of there. And look at this particular comment in December of 2020. Scott Atlas resigns, he says. I imagine it is because everything that is happening now with the surges has finally proven him to be incorrect on virtually everything that he had said, which is garbage. The one area where he was correct was in saying that school children are not the drivers of the outbreak. Okay? So here we have Fauci secretly admitting in his diary school children were not the drivers of the outbreak, even as he was secretly, repeatedly pushing for the closures of schools, even though he knew children were not drivers of the outbreak. And you see this throughout the documents. He was pushing for closures of our economy with governors and mayors, the governor of California, governors of New York, the mayor. He was like, shut everything down. Anyone asked, should I shut it down? He was always guaranteed to say yes. And we now know what the shutdowns did to children, what they did to our economy. He was running his own shutdown agenda, according to these diaries. And here there's an admission that children weren't an issue, when at the time he was encouraging the closures of schools. As I say, on December 1st, 2020, while schools remain closed or heavily restricted, Fauci privately admitted Scott Atlas, who he was trying to destroy, was, quote, correct that school children were not the drivers of the COVID outbreak. So all this is pretty devastating to his reputation. He's 85 years old. You know, Congress may try to find him in contempt, given the way the Senate's been operating lately. The Senate doesn't want to do anything principled in so many ways, at least the majority of senators. So I wonder if they'll even bite at the apple here. But in the end, the FBI, Justice Department, to the degree they're capable and competent, or willing, and I have doubts on all three, should be pushing hard on investigating Fauci and the issues that I raised. And of course, we're not going to kind of just sit back and wait. We have many Freedom of Information Act lawsuits that we're pursuing on these issues. For example, we're representing a watchdog group in federal court, and we've been battling to get the royalty fee information from NIH for NIH employees who are getting compensated from the private sector for their, quote, inventions. How much were these folks getting in terms of money? They don't want to give us the information. So right now, RFK Jr. can say, why are we holding this material back? There's no good reason to do so. And I'm tired of just giving the government air on this show with their fake reasons for not wanting us to get the info. You can, if you're interested, you can go look at our website to see what the argument's about. But it's just bunk what we're dealing with. So at the same time, while they're releasing all this important diary information, all of which, again, should have been given to Judicial Watch years ago, they're hiding, the HHS's, specific information about what Fauci was getting in terms of remuneration from the taxpayer. It was treated as compensation by the government, and they don't want to tell us the details. And many other NIH employees. I'm not saying any of these people were doing anything wrong specifically, but we have a right to know the compensation. So this is what I love about Judicial Watch. We've gotten all this information on Fauci, more information comes out, and I get annoyed because we didn't get the information as it was supposed to be given to us. But then again, we're like, oh, well, there's more information here. What other information can we get for the American people? How will this help us in our pursuit of information in our current lawsuits? What other Freedom of Information Act requests should we file? Where should we file them? Wait, Fauci was talking to Governor Cuomo? Maybe we'll ask New York for documents. Fauci was talking in New York City? Maybe we'll ask New York City for documents, etc. We know what to do, and I hope the Justice Department, FBI, and Congress knows what to do. For once. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button and like our video down below.